All right.
Good evening. It is May 28th, 2024. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education special meeting. Here is your board president, Shelley Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. All meetings of the Board of Education are open to members of the public unless publicly noticed as a confidential closed session as allowed by the law Education Code Section 35147. Members of the public may address the board as outlined in the public comment section of the agenda. The audio of all meetings is recorded, and a member of the public may be held liable for any slanderous or otherwise defamatory statements. In consideration of the board and members of the audience, please turn off or silence your cell phones while in the boardroom. The San Marino Unified School District encourages those with disabilities to participate fully in the public meeting process. If you need a disability-related modification or accommodation, including auxiliary aids or services to participate in the public meeting, contact the assistant to the superintendent at jdelatore@smusd.us or at 626-299-7000. Extension 1310, at least 48 hours before the scheduled board meeting, so that we may make every reasonable effort to accommodate you under Government Code Section 54953.2, Americans with Disability Act of 1990, under Section 20242, USC, Section 12132. Documents provided to a majority of the Board of Education regarding an open session item on this agenda will be made available for the public inspection in the district office located at 1665 West Drive, San Marino, during normal business hours. In addition, such writings and documents may be viewed on the district's website at www.smusd.us. This is now 5:33. We're at open session and the meeting is called to order. Roll call, please. Mrs. Lam? Here. Mrs. Chong? Here. Mrs. Gill? Here. Mr. Chang?
Here.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. So attendance is called. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as read?
I make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Thank you, Mrs. Gill. Okay, roll call, Mrs. Lam?
Aye.
Mrs. Chong?
Aye.
Mrs. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. And next is public comment section. The Board of Education has adopted Board Policy 9323B to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have three options to submit public comments. First, you may submit through an online form. Second, you may request to speak during the meeting via Zoom. Third, request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. And those who have submitted online, the public may submit public comments for the open or closed session on May 28th from 10 a.m. through 12 p.m. As of noon, there were no comments received, but if we had received comments during the time, it would not be read during the meeting, but will be provided to the Board of Education. You may request to speak during the meeting via Zoom. Dr. Choi, are there any in attendance in Zoom?
No attendees on Zoom.
All right, there are no attendees on Zoom. So next, to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card, as we only have a single visitor. Would you like to pull a card? You're good. No, I was teasing. Okay, so please complete the public comment card if you so wish, but our attendee does not. So we will now proceed to our board study session. I would now like to turn it over to Rick and Jo May from LPA, who will lead us through the final draft of the facilities master plan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. Superintendent Dr. Delatore, it's nice to see everybody again. We're very pleased to be here today, and we're going to, as mentioned, walk you through the draft or essentially the final document of the master plan. You all should have a copy on your podium there. I think everybody may have also made available a PDF version of it, which is maybe a little friendlier to review, but it's nice to have the hard copy in front of you as well. So you may or may not have had a chance to look at the previous version, the PDF version, but we'd like to spend the rest of this hour just walking through that document. We're going to spend less time presenting it back to you. A lot of the information we have discussed at the last study session when we went through a prioritization process. And so a lot of this will be review for you, but we did want to kind of walk you through the organization of how it's laid out in this last document and then turn it over and see, just let you ask as many questions as you may have about the document or about the process or anything you would like to go into. So we'll get started. We'll talk a little bit about the document itself, the process that we went through, the facilities master plan themes, just review again of the needs, and then the results of the prioritization process, and then leave it for discussion and next steps. Here is a copy of the schedule that you've probably seen many, many times. We've spent the better part of a year together going through this process, reaching out to many, many different stakeholders. We're already in the end of May of 2024, and we're pretty proud of all the work that's gone into it. And just to give you a summary, kind of in the top of this slide, it talks about 470 participants altogether that went into informing the direction that this facilities master plan went into. We've had numbers of meetings here at the board level, leadership meeting, 4 meetings at the board plus 9 leadership separate meetings. And we've engaged every corner of the district in terms of the school sites with the site visioning workshops. We worked with the principals very carefully. The principal put together site committees. We had, as you know, the facilities advisory committee was very hands-on. We met with them multiple times as well through the whole process. They're extremely engaged, including the prioritization process that we went through with them. We had 2 community town halls plus a community partners meeting, and those were very well attended. We also did, as part of the general community outreach, we did surveys. We reached out to 124 different students that had responded back into the student surveys, and then the broader community survey, which includes all the staff and teachers, 536 recipients from that survey. So it was very broad based. We walked all the different campuses with district representation, and then getting in deeper into each of the aspects of the district in terms of the focus groups and workshops with ed visioning. So we helped that informed the actual master plan diagrams. It was pretty comprehensive, and we reached out to a lot of folks. We think that's always the secret to success for a facilities master plan. May will walk you through just the organization of the document in front of you.
Thank you, Rick. All right, I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide, but you have that also in front of you. Just a quick, it's an overview of all of the different sections and how the entire document is organized. You know, all of this you have seen previously in a lot of our presentations and our summaries of the outcomes of a lot of the activities and engagement activities that we have completed this past year. So again, a lot of work put into it, and you know, we are just facilitating this process really, and all of this is just a lot of input, and your voice is hopefully captured in this document. So the first section really is like an executive summary. It's an introduction to the process and where we started off with the district's vision and mission and goals, as well as how the facilities master plan also aligns with all of those goals and how we can bring up the current facilities to match that vision. The projects along the way, the schedule that Rick had presented and we've updated along the way is also there, and as well as a few acknowledgement pages of all of the participants that that were engaged throughout the process. Section 2 is what we're call planning considerations. This is like some of the assumptions and our approach in terms of how we laid out the facilities master plans. Included there are the demographics, including, you know, that we are keeping assuming the same enrollment as currently, but adding on the TK grade level, planning enrollment assumptions, as well as district loading standard assumptions there. Some of the themes that really came out of that, which I'll go over a little bit later, and then some of the and all of the stakeholder priorities along the way in terms of like the site committee priorities, the FAC committee priorities, as well as some of the other workshop priorities that we had, the community priorities that we gathered along the way, and I'll go over that later in more detail. 3 is the educational specifications. This is that document that that the district already had. However, we did hold several workshops there where we talked about how that ed specs actually applied to the specific campuses, as well as, talked a little bit about like how some of these facilities may look like for the future of San Marino School District. Also, section 4 would be the actual campus master plans, which we've presented before that, as well as talks a little bit of each of the vision that, which we talked about by each of the school principals, as well as their site committees, as well as the cost summary for each of the campuses that we presented last time. Section 5 is the conditions assessments, a lot of need definitely presented in that section. And as you saw previously in like photos, as well as a write-up for each of the school campuses, a lot of that information came from the workshop we held with Gil and his team, where they talked about a lot of the systems being at the end of their life cycles and in need of replacement, and some of the work that really needs to happen in the next like 10, 15 years out, right? And then section 6 is just the appendix, in which had the more detailed cost estimate, which you hopefully have received a copy of that. We have sent that previously, as well as to the FAC as well. Okay, next slide. Any questions there? All right, so some of the themes that came out of the overall themes and that we've already, you've seen captured in each of the master plans. Number 1 was really about repair, modernizing, and upgrading older learning environments. A lot of the classroom modernization, modernizing those and getting those up to the same level as some of the other buildings that have already had upgrades. Continuing the process of technology upgrades so that we can be ready for the future and supporting the future of technology there. Systems, again, like I mentioned before, at the end of their life cycle, needing to be replaced now that we no longer can band-aid together, as well as taking a look at maybe some opportunities for energy savings and potential like solar canopies at each of the campuses to be able to capture some of those initiatives that the district would like to pursue. Number 2 would be supporting specialized programs with innovative facilities. So you see that captured in the master plan, providing a dedicated space or lab space for STEM, science, art, and music at the elementary school level campuses, upgrading some of the CTE spaces at the high school, as well as providing modernization to some of the elective spaces at the middle school as well. 3 would be safe and healthy environments. And I put under that category, really continuing to enhance the site safety, leveraging technology features in terms of, better cameras and equipment, improving some of the lighting on some of the walkways on a lot of the campuses, as well as improvements to physical education facilities. We talked a lot about that at the high school, supporting healthy lifestyles for students, and then also making sure that there's dedicated spaces for the increased need of student services in terms of there's offices for counselors and psychologists, and a hub for these specific services and that staff. 4 would be enhancing outdoor play, learning, and dining environments. So enhancing some of the outdoor areas that are beautiful currently, but maybe adding site furnishings, shade, so that learning can continue to happen out there. A lot of that, you have lovely patios that you have currently at Carver, but maybe echoing that at the other campuses as well. Repairing a lot of the hard courts where there is a lot of cracks and things like that, the play fields, gopher holes and things like that, repairs on those. Adding shades in the play area so that these can be more comfortably used for physical education purposes by the students, and then providing additional outdoor dining areas for students. And a lot of that stemmed from COVID, as well as an increase of students participating in the lunch programs due to the free lunches by the state. Category 5, or theme number 5, would be transitional kindergarten and TK as well as kindergarten classrooms. In terms of providing the adequate facilities that are appropriate for that grade level, which included larger classrooms and direct access to restrooms, appropriate sized playgrounds in terms of bringing that grade level in, expansion of those playgrounds to be able to accommodate that additional grade level, and then adding teaching stations as well for that. So the new construction you see on the 2 elementary school campuses for that. And then 6 would be fostering community connections, continued, partnerships, celebrating those, leveraging those programs, as well as dedicated spaces for the PTA, as well as joint use type of opportunities in terms of facilities. Okay. And then the next few slides you have seen before, but I thought it would, just kind of images usually better than 1,000 words, right? And so, some of these really just identify a lot of the needs at each of their campuses. A lot of great work has been done, but there's still, quite a bit of need, right? Deteriorated facilities, amenities, cracks in the paving, outdated facilities, accessibility type of issues, that would need to be upgraded if any modernization or any work were to be done to those campuses. The need for more technology and power in a lot of the classroom spaces. And then at the elementary school sites, like I mentioned before, replacing some of the portable classrooms that have been in use for numerous years and are in poorer condition that could be replaced with permanent construction, and then increasing student dining spaces in the outdoor areas. And then similarly at Valentine, replacing some of the wood chips at the playgrounds to rubber surfacing, a lot of ramp access type of issues, providing a better and an appropriate library for that campus, so that it's in parity with the other campuses as well as the multi-purpose room space. Okay. And just summarizing, here are what the final results was that we presented last time was the FAC prioritized scopes of work, and again with alignment there with the FM3 survey, are repair and modernizing some of the older facilities, that including HVAC replacements, intrusion fire alarms, safety type of systems, window replacements that weren't done last time, library at Valentine Elementary School, safety and security items, site utility upgrades. As you modernize, you want to be kind of doing that works. If all of the walls and the floors are already opened up, might as well do that. And, they're at the end of their life cycle, and including technology upgrades with equipment and infrastructure, so that we're ready for the future of technology. Multi-purpose room at Valentine. Exterior play spaces, play fields and hard courts. A lot of that is like repairing of the existing spaces. New construction classrooms to replace the portables and build TK at the 2 elementary school sites. Student support and counseling services. Some of those spaces there at each of the school sites, as well as the career technical, reconfiguring the CTE spaces at the high school. Right. And then off to the side, it was a second tier of priorities there if funding were to become available, or, you know, the district were to pursue additional funding elsewhere, or, you know, future bond. You know, these were two of the items that were also labeled as priorities by the FAC. Would be the elementary STEM, art, music classroom spaces, the middle and high school elective spaces, additional career tech needs, as well as performing arts, as well as all of the physical education needs that were identified at the high school, which was that athletic complex and the locker room upgrades and the pool and fitness. And each of these, we presented this last time, but just a summary of when we asked each of the groups their priorities. At the bottom there, we have the site committee priorities. In the middle there are the priorities that rose to the top with the community town hall. They were also asked and they were given dots to vote for priorities for each of the school campuses. And then at the top there, the summary of the FAC priorities, and then the ones with the stars or they're highlighted in blue. You'll see correlations between each of the group levels. And I think, you know, the FAC really took those into consideration in terms of priorities and making sure that every site got something, as well as, you know, some of their top priorities were included in as part of the group of priorities that they selected. And so this is for Huntington Middle School. Again, modernization, safety and security items, technology, student support and counseling. At Carver, these are all of the priorities that rose to the top. You know, quite a few of them echoed, you know, all of the community town hall priorities, as well as the site community priorities. So it's always great to see that kind of alignment in terms of priorities for each of the group levels. And then Valentine Elementary School, again, you know, many of the priorities at the site wanted the community town hall also agreed with, and then as well as the FAC committee also agreed with as well. Okay. Great, and then Rick's gonna.
Slides.
Yeah.
So the last time we all met here, we gave you the extraordinarily difficult job to try to prioritize the tasks, which I know was a difficult process. And this was just a summary of the draft as we left the boards here with you. We wanted to show them here. And I know that was not something that was completely finalized and kind of is a work in progress. So this final prioritization is not in the actual final published master plan document, but it is something that we understand that may be revisited at a later date. But it looked like the priorities that the board had come up with were fairly close to the Facilities Advisory Committee. And so there's a lot of similarities. But then there was the tier 1 and then some items that rose into tier 2. But this is something I think may be a work in progress. You might want to revisit at a later date. And just a quick review of the scope categories. Last time we walked through a very extensive description of each of these categories from A to N, but just reviewing these quickly. A is the repair, modernization, reconfiguring of classrooms and doing all the systems. B is site utilities. C is all the new construction, replacing portables, building the new TK. Item D is all the elementary schools, STEM and art, music classrooms, middle and high school elective spaces, CTE, career path, and career tech and performing arts. Category E dealt with the multi-purpose room, NPR and food services. And F is libraries work, whether it was modernization or new construction. G is student support and counseling, psych, speech, IEP, conference spaces. H is improvements and expansion of the administration office and staff support spaces. I dealt with the physical education and athletic improvements. And this was mainly at the high school for the gym, locker rooms, and pool and fitness. And item J is safety and security. K is all the outdoor learning environments and improvements at the quads. Scope L dealt with exterior play spaces, play fields, and hard courts. M is next generation flexible furniture. And then N dealt with all the technology improvements. So we did review this again last time we met, talking about the total funds of the funding summary. And just to review this again, there's a certain amount of dollars the district has, including developer fees, general fund and deferred maintenance set aside, the Fund 25 balance, the state school facilities program, that there's some dollars that the district's eligible for there. And future general obligation bond was talked about. So altogether, and then there is the COP that has to be paid off for work that was done at Huntington Middle School. So altogether, that came up with about 206 million in terms of total funds available. And what we asked the district to do in terms of prioritization is, with all the things that are included in our cost estimates, that you need to set aside a third of those dollars for the unforeseens, the unknowns that can't be quantified at this level of a master plan. And primarily it's the escalation costs. Everything in your estimate, in the cost estimate, is sized to $2024. So assuming this will go on for 8 to 10 year program potentially, if you put enough aside for your escalation, average it over enough years, that should be adequate in terms of some of the other unknowns like interim housing, which can't be quantified at the state, and some of the offsite improvements and things like that. So that's why we instructed you to just spend the 2/3 of the dollars, which comes to about 139 million. I think we just roughly rounded up to 140 million. So that's how we ended up with that amount of dollars to prioritize. Any questions here on this slide? Or you're all really good listeners last time when we went over all these slides, and I know there was quite a bit of questions at that last presentation. So this was just meant to be a very broad overview of the document, and I know it's probably not fair for you to ask a lot of questions. You probably haven't had a lot of time to look through it, but we did want to leave some time for questions. But we did think it'd be interesting if you could maybe, if you had some thoughts about some of the things that this process as we went through it. Did you learn anything over the last year or so from the process? So these are just some kind of questions that if you guys would like to ponder. What are you hearing from the community? And then we're anticipating tonight then the FMPA board adoption. But other than that, we'll leave it back to the district for any potential questions.
I have a quick question about the high school plan. I know that we were talking about separating out the athletics completely. Is it possible with the way the plan is as our master plan to do the phasing of the gym and leave the existing pool intact so that the kids can still have their swim program and water polo? Or is that just like an all or nothing?
Not at all. We actually chatted about that on the way up, that there's probably a lot of different scenarios. The plan shows the ultimate build out that would
Yeah.
be, say, the long-term vision. And we were talking about things, if you just replace, say, one of the gyms, there would have to be a process. We'd have to really talk through some of these options, but you'd probably have to sacrifice maybe some of your ball fields. Maybe what you could do is the fault line does throw a curveball and you have to just stay away from that fault line. So if you propose new construction, it has to be outside of that area. So you could potentially build a new gym, a different location, and then perhaps demo the small gym or where the small gym is now, I guess it's outside the fault line. So you could do some new construction there. You could even in the future look at your aquatics facility. It's something you do in a different location altogether. So there are options, they all come with compromises, but certainly it's not an all or nothing. And I think you could look at some exploration of how to do some of the work if you were to prioritize, say, aquatics as your highest priority, for example.
Yeah, like Rick was saying, I mean, it can definitely be phased, but it just might not be like the ideal location, right? Like we could definitely build the gym in different spot, or you build the new gym, but then you don't have space for the full size pool, right? And then when the time comes to do the pool, it might not fit there. So then you might have to say, well, okay, I'm okay if the pool goes to where the softball field is up at the top, right? Or something like that. Or I mean, do you move the entire, baseball up to the north and then use some of that space and then convert that to a smaller softball field, something like that, right? So there's some, it's like a little puzzle, right? That you've got to kind of have.
And
to-
in your planning, do you have different scenarios that we could look at? I mean, too, rather than, because I do feel like this is sort of a living document and it's nothing set in stone. I mean, it's just an idea and where we want to be going.
Mhm.
But but now you're saying all these other things that do sound interesting. I mean, we just want to be able to get the most bang for our buck and, you know, the most benefit for the most kids, basically. So,
Yeah, we don't have any sketches or anything that we could show or present. If we were to look, explore different options, we'd want to understand better what are the priorities, what are the scenarios? If you said we'd really like, you know, it's really important for us to just have one gym, or aquatics is really our driver here, if we were to do that as a phase one, we would need a little bit of,
more direction.
yeah, more direction, and then we could look at different options, but we definitely, I don't want to make it sound like there's a lot of other good options, because there would be probably a sacrifice.
I know
to do that.
I know there are a lot of constraints with these sites, so
Yeah.
just also thank you for all your work on this.
Can we revisit what the rule is with respect to building around a fault line? Is that you can't build within 50 feet? Is that correct?
Correct.
Of a
Yeah.
fault line?
So
Okay,
50 feet on each side, so it's a zone of about
Yeah.
100 feet. And you have to note that, you know, this is like this information, you know, was from like the geotechnical side, and obviously trenching would have to be done to actually locate the exact spot of it, right? And so that thing could shift, right? And so, you know, that would have to be looked at if, you know, when the potential project came online.
So what they would do is trench perpendicular to where they think the fault line is, and they literally map the actual location based on geotechnical trenching. And then that would be used to establish the 50-foot setback. Right now, this is based on record documents from the geological survey that shows where it's been connected.
and just to refresh, the facilities master plan is the district's vision, the Board of Education's vision for where we're going into the future. It is, as board clerk Francesca Gill said, a living, breathing document that is subject to change over time. So going back to the comment that was made that we did not complete, the Board of Education did not complete its prioritization. And that's okay, right? In terms of us adopting the plan this evening. We can add the board's prioritization at a later time into the master plan, correct? And also, as long as everything that we want done in the future is on the project list, the board can move forward based on changing trends and emerging issues that we may not be able to foresee at this time, right?
Absolutely, yes.
okay.
So it's really just a recommendation. It just shows it's the board advises these are where we see the highest priorities, but
Mhm.
things do change.
Right.
Absolutely. And then it's recommended to actually do an update to the master plan document every 5 years or so. So you could consider that depending on what projects you might complete by then. Then look at maybe a refresh or just an update to the master plan to reestablish priorities perhaps. But should you go forward with the bond and should it pass, then you could then go into more of an implementation phase where then you would need to make a determination about, because right now, let's say you had a list of priorities. They're not necessarily in the order they would have to be rolled out. So these are just the projects you want to do. So you'd want to establish, you'd want to align the projects, the cost with the amount of dollars as the funding comes available. So you want to make sure all those things are in alignment as you move forward with projects. So that you would typically do once you know you've got your bond is passed and you go through that next process.
Okay, great.
A lot of the priorities are in scope categories, right? And it says modernization, but it's like modernization of what exactly, right? That really just could be determined at a later date and during implementation phase, like, am I going to build a fence, right, for safety and security, or am I going to upgrade the fire alarm instead, or something's falling down at the performing arts, theaters, or something like that, like some emergency thing you have to do first, right? You know, so that could definitely determine at a later date.
Okay.
I have a question on implementation should the bond pass. In terms of timeline, you mentioned about 8 to 10 years for everything that's been listed. Is the renovation and everything else planned going to be planned around breaks when the school is off? Or I know there's a fund allocation for interim housing. So is that's the 1/3 that's going in the event this happens during the school year? There's students in classrooms are maneuvered.
Yeah, so keep in mind the types of projects that are in this list are pretty substantial projects. There's very few opportunities to do substantial work just in summers and breaks and things like that. So typically, when you're looking at a school site, if a school site's to receive, I mean, think of maybe Huntington Middle School, how long it took to build that gym. That gym took probably about 1.5 years or so to get that built. So when you're doing new construction, you're talking usually a whole calendar year. And depending on where the best location for that building to be, again, the master plan is a vision, long-term vision, it's a diagram. It's not a design. So new buildings could even end up in different locations than that they show in the master plan. So that would drive potential interim housing. So you would bring in portable classrooms if you happen to disrupt kids. So I would say in most cases, you're not going to be limiting your construction to just summers and off times. Now, you want to take advantage of your summers for things like utility improvements where you might have to be doing work to say sewer lines, or maybe some of the technology work that you might have to take things offline for 4 or 5 weeks, maybe to get things improved. You would want to do that over a summertime. But even if you looked at even a fairly modest modernization program of your typical classrooms of doing new HVAC finishes, technology, a typical modernization of say a building wing would take you, I would say, no less than 6 months. So you're going to have to move those kids somewhere for that time period. The question about interim housing is, do you want to just have a wing of 4 classrooms and do that in a 6-month period? Or do you want to move kids out of 3 wings at once and have interim housing and do like a whole section of your campus? Those are some of the questions you would address while you're trying to implement the program. So there's a lot of those kinds of decisions, and it's a question about how much disruption, do you want to do? We work with some school districts where they did a modernization of a high school. And one example is I'll just give you an example. Jordan High School in Long Beach took 12 years to go through the whole program. Well, they're now looking at doing a program at another high school, and they wanted to accelerate that. And they're cutting that time frame down to just 6 years of constant construction, which is quite substantial. But they're doing that by taking and is essentially building an entire interim housing village where they can move large quantities. They have 24 different interim housing classrooms at once, where they can take whole building sections and do them all at one time. So that tends to speed up the construction process. So I hope that answers your question, but yeah,
Thank you.
I think everybody needs to be aware of that. When you're starting to do this type of work, it's pretty disruptive and it's going to go on for some time.
I have a question more for the district in terms of what are we looking at for the next step after the adoption of this? What happens next?
So after the adoption of the facilities master plan, we are looking to receive the tracking survey results, which will be shared with the Board of Education to give us a sense of where the community is now. And again, it's just a sample of our voting population in the community. After they have had an opportunity to be more educated about the bond. So that will inform the board's decisions going forward. And then in June, the board will be presented with a resolution to place a no tax increase bond measure on the ballot for November 5th. And that resolution will be pending the board's approval before the end of June. So it will likely happen the second meeting in June.
So given that timeline, thank you for this. This is incredibly comprehensive and very thorough. I really appreciate that you put all of the cost estimates as the appendix, because that's the biggest thing everyone's gonna have questions about.
Okay.
Why this much, why that much? So that was very helpful to have all of that in there. Unpause. So back to then. I'm concerned that what was addressed in the FMP was the initial survey regarding the accountability oversight and all of those aspects. And we haven't had a chance yet to really talk more about the Citizens Oversight Committee, which I know is something that typically takes place after the bond is passed, but I think we had talked about possibly doing something before to show as a measure of good faith to the community, our intention to be held very accountable with how we spend our finances. So that would be the first concern. My second concern, though, is one of the biggest questions that was raised every time this has come up is where's the priority list? What's going to happen first? Which ones get addressed? I'm seeing here 4 different perspectives of what we do first and how we spend that potential 200 million. And I don't see any answers. And so my question to the district and to us as a board is, are we going to do that before the resolution is actually put before the people, before the board to approve?
So I don't think that the priority of projects is typically done until you hire a project manager, you pass your bond, right? And you know how the bonds are going to issue. Dr. Lynn, you can speak to the oversight committee question because we had done a lot of work on exploring that as an opportunity. And so I'd like you to address that, why we are not.
Right, we were brainstorming that as a, and not to be presumptuous about, the bond passing, but also, I mean, from an accountability standpoint, to show the public in good faith that, because the survey results came back, the first survey saying that accountability is, ranked really on the top notch. Just to show the public that we are very serious about the accountability question. Forming that citizens oversight committee requires board approval. So I think that, based on the board's direction,
But
then we can
also,
pursue
we
that.
had talked about the fact that there's a gap in time between forming the oversight committee and the bond actually passing, where they would be doing nothing or. And
Right,
so
they won't really have an assignment other than doing intros, getting up to speed on some of the work that the FAC has done. But there will certainly be a gap in activities for the steering committee.
Right. Which I recognize, but I also noticed that when we had our FAC meetings, we spent probably the first half trying to get everybody up to speed. And so if we end up doing that same process with the Citizens Oversight Committee, we're going to end up hitting this point where we're trying to catch everybody up and we're not really going to be able to hit the ground running. And I don't know that people are going to be happy about passing a bond for $200 million without knowing, number one, how it's going to be spent, or number two, that it's going to be held accountable.
Well, I think for certain it's going to be held accountable. You have to have, every district has to have an oversight committee once the bond is passed. So there's no question as to whether or not an oversight committee will be formed. It by statute has to be formed. I think that we can certainly advertise, if that's the board's pleasure, for an oversight committee and begin the process. And it's up to the board, we'll do whatever the board wants us to do. We just thought it through and we talked to other districts that have passed bonds in the past that are high performing districts. And they advised that we wait until we get closer to that timeline. So it's just whatever makes sense for the Board of Education and for our committee, we're happy to do. But we can send materials out, strongly indicating that we will have an oversight committee, encouraging people to apply for the positions that will be open on that oversight committee. There are specific criteria that has to be met for the members of an oversight committee. We're happy to do all of that. We do have a priorities list that the Facilities Advisory Committee worked really hard on that is part of this facilities master plan. In addition to that, we're going to have a project list with everything that is inside of this facilities master plan memorialized on that project list, which can be done. But we don't know yet, how the bond is going to issue, how much money we're going to get right out of the gate. So there are a lot of variables that have to be figured out, and we have to have the people in place to be able to execute that, which we don't as of now. Francesca?
I think I and understanding what Mrs. Chon is getting at as far as, and I agree with what you're saying. But if we are going to garner support, we need to say Carver gets this, Valentine gets the, or like,
The plan is, like.
Yeah,
what's
I don't
sort of
think she's talking
the
about-
caveat That we know things may come up.
right. I don't think she was talking about order of projects, if I may say that. I do think that we as a board did not complete our prioritization. And I think it closely aligns with the FAC. I mean, they dug so deep and spent so much time. But also, you know, things have continued to evolve, like week by week and just economic conditions and all of that. So I would like to have our big items very clear, like bullet pointed for garnering support. That's where I am with that.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. So did you want then to complete your prioritization? I mean, this is what we have so far, right? This is what we
Yes.
worked on at the last meeting. Are there changes that the board would like to make to this prioritization?
I think where we left off was we all sort of looked at the
Mhm.
tier two and went, oh, we
Uh-huh.
need to put parts of tier two into tier one.
Mhm.
But
Right.
that would require cutting stuff from tier one. And think that's what
I
we-
proposed, just floating this for the board, to do one TK site. And if that's going to be Valentine, because the Valentine has multi-purpose for it, all these other construction, and maybe see how it goes and not throw all, so that's 7.5 million, basically, I guess, the new classrooms. But that could be something that could maybe get a smaller, high visibility project at the high school, because I do feel like we need more high school in this. Not to the extent of the $71 million, because we just don't have the money.
Yeah.
I would love to do
me
the
too.
whole thing. I mean, trust me, I love
too.
sports. So, but we need support from all of our families, and I feel like what we've discussed about the high school being our sort of our weakest point in enrollment, and just continuing to support the upper level of education and, you know, matriculating our students to amazing colleges and producing these, you know, world-class citizens. Or, I think we need to do more there. And that's my point. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to make some comment. I certainly understand each board member what you are thinking, but unfortunately, and also in the reality, you know, I think that we always compete with the time, because the last time we have a bond election, we failed. So the time we already put a price tag about 2 million, but this time we probably still put a 200 million, because we learn about the experience, and there's a couple of factors, because this is a small school district. You cannot raise the big budget, yeah, to get more than the 200 million. But unfortunately, from the last time to now, I think already a year, you know, in the meantime, inflation and the industry, the labor cost, whatever is increase. So we never catch up, because we are the smallest school district. But in the meantime, we still have to do something, because if we don't do, then our school district, you know, the quality of a facility will fall behind. So end up, but luckily, you know, this time we have this consultant. I feel better than for the master plan. This time really very detailed. So give us a lot of detailed information. So I think each of our board member, we can figure out what is a priority, what we have to do. But you know, in the United States high school, you know, I think athletic facility always is very important. If we have a new facility, you look like you really have a gut to, you know, the to do the renovation for entire the campus. But if you do the smaller one, and then you may not show the what I think in the future what this bond can beneficial to the school district, but there's no choice because even right now, probably some of the citizens we say the 200 million, they still think, oh, it's big. But I think if you compare for the budget on the outside industry, labor cost, whatever, this became the smaller the fund compared to other school district. So I think the later, as the board member, we just need to take a leadership to decide. But I don't know if that tonight we have to do very detailed to identify which one we have priority. I don't know if that timing is right. And also, I appreciate the consultant company that you can come out with 3 priority for each school site. So you have, you know, the facility advisory committee priority, you have a community town hall priority, you have a site committee priority. But I can read the site committee priority probably is more close to the parent they are thinking. But for the facility advisory committee, I think their listing is more realistic. I think they also think about the cost issue and the budget issue. So I know this power is a dilemma. Which priority we want to set the first, but I think at this time we just need to show the community and the school parent and the student, you know, we have a very good master plan. So I don't know, is that the next step we have to decide for tonight.
I agree with Joseph. Yeah, Board Vice President Chang. I agree with what you're saying, that we may not be able to decide prioritization tonight. But it is something that as a board, we can go back on and put that together.
I'm concerned about our timing. If we're putting a resolution on the ballot by June and we don't have a priority list, when will that work get done? And how can we say to the community that we are going to plan for these items? So I think what became clear in the work that's been done, that most likely a second bond will have to be done in order to actually get the rest of the items on that list. If we mess up the spending of the first bond, we are not going to get a second bond at any point, because the community is going to be upset with the way it was laid out. So whether we do it tonight or we do it before the resolution, that's not necessarily, I don't have an opinion on, but I would agree with the prioritization of having one TK site and then adding more items from the list at the high school site, because I do think it's important that we have more work done representative across the district. And if we go for that second bond, that TK site can be put in there. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done at the TK level in terms of the state and their funding. and how much they're going to be putting into it. They haven't decided the student ratios even for what the class sizes would be. They don't have standards even for education for the TK level. There's still a lot that's undetermined in rolling out the TK plan. And for us to move forward with 2 sites now, when there are significant needs at the other sites, becomes a little bit, putting it a little bit further ahead than it, in my opinion, I think we should. And that's just my opinion. I recognize that.
Well, I think the board, Chung, the comment is very valuable. But you know, I want to share my terrible experience because I already been 2 decades here. So 1997, we issued a bond, but then we start to, after a couple of years, we feel we cannot finish. So then another bond, I think second bond is issued in 2000 or 2001. The second bond just trying to pick up what the first bond they cannot finish. So but luckily the time the community resident they still support. So that's the reason the second bond they approve, and then we can finish. So until right now, so that's 2 decades. The student they are utilized for the current the facility, to finish their K-12 education. So this time, if 200 is not enough, we start to think about another second bond later. I don't know if that is realistic or not. Yeah, I don't know if that the resident can give us the chance. Yeah.
May I speak? to
Yeah. Yeah.
that? In my opinion,
Yeah.
the difference is having done the work
Yeah.
and having a roadmap
Mhm.
of, look, we have 300 million in need. So we explain, I feel like that our cap of spending is really under 140, but it's intentional. Like if we're acting with intention, that it will be phased as another bond. It's not like, oops, we overspent, or, oh, we didn't think about it. Like this is a 10-year master plan. So therefore there will be another phase of funding that will be needed. And I think that's an important message to do. But in that, I think it's really important to have our priorities as a board. What is step 1? So
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah, I think.
So end up the step 1 is very important. Once the design, the priority, we are utilize 200, and we have to do very accurate, and then in the meantime, I think I don't want to give the school district administrator the pressure, but we need to run very well and let the community people and the student parent, they have a confidence. And then if we say we need more money to do another one, and then that probably is doable. Or otherwise, just like the 6 or 8 years ago, we even want to approve the one, you cannot pass.
And I just want to remind the Board of Education that it will be a bit of a challenge because we still have 2 parcel taxes, right? We have Measure E and Measure R. Measure R is something that we're going to need to campaign for in terms of renewal in 2025. And in 2026, that's when we will have 26, 27 Measure E, right? It's 26, 27 or 27, 28? Measure E.
6 years, 6 years.
Yeah, but I think they're 2 years apart, right? The Measure R and Measure E. So Measure R, I know, is coming up in 2025. So then 2027, you have Measure E. So we just need to make sure that we're not, reaching the point of saturation in terms of getting support. And the board's, one of the board's most important jobs is really being a visionary and being able to come up with whatever is representative of our community. And I know we've heard a lot from a lot of different stakeholders, and they don't all agree because they have different priorities based on where their kids are attending school. So I've heard the argument that we should invest in the high school because we want to retain enrollment in San Marino. But I've also heard an opposing argument that if the high school continues to decline, right, and we're putting all our money at a school site that isn't sustainable in the future, that gets tricky. So there's a risk, an inherent risk in any decision that the board makes. And so, you know, it's going to be a tough decision, but one that can be fully informed. And we really do need to represent the stakeholders out there. And I think the Facilities Advisory Committee was a really good mix of people who understand the community and really were able to voice their opinions. And they were not necessarily all aligned, but I think at the end of the day, Mr. Morris was instrumental in getting the committee to reach a consensus, which everyone agreed that they could live with what we had on paper. And that may be where we're at. But the board will need to take a look at that. And as the visionaries for the school district and representatives, elected officials representing your stakeholders, your people in the community, you'll need to make, you know, those decisions on what is the most important and what, you know, we put first. And so we're relying on you for that. So we can have a special board study session to reprioritize or to take a look at what we have now and decide if you guys need more time to do that. We want to make sure that the board feels comfortable with the process. The FAC worked 15 months on this. We've had how many town halls? 2 town halls and school site meetings. And so I feel like this process has been far more in-depth and comprehensive than what we did when we put Measure S on the ballot. And so when the board decides whether or not to adopt the resolution to place the measure on the ballot, it doesn't go on the ballot until November. So we still have time to continue to work. The campaign committee would take over at the point in which the board adopts the resolution. So, you know, we can get a lot of stuff done in June.
Do we have to have a prioritization meeting before the resolution is passed? Because after that, we can't speak about it anymore? Or
You can.
can we work on it like in July?
So you can continue, they can continue to work on the prioritization. What you can't do is campaign for the bond. So you can still, it's my understanding, work on the facilities master plan and the project list, which is
Not
necessarily telling people to vote for it, right? It's, you know, neutral in that way. But I really feel like we need to have Joy come out and advise the board as the bond consultant, and approving the facilities master plan doesn't really have an impact on the rest of the work that needs to be done, right? With the exception of, you know, just adding it in once it is done, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
You can look at that as your first step towards implementation as well, in terms of your prioritization list.
So, thank you everyone for, your input and your insight. I value, each of your expertise in terms of your focus. But if you could turn to page 7. It talks a little bit about priorities in terms of Carver Elementary, Valentine Elementary, Huntington Middle School, and San Marino High School. While that's one slice, one look at a cross section of our 4 schools, we also have the linear picture on page 5. And in terms of its linear look in tier 1, we can look at it and say, oh, look, we're spending 40 million on new classrooms. How is it divvied out in terms of, are the new classrooms coming over in Carver only? Are we doing some because we're eliminating the portables at Valentine? Where is that spent? Because if you have a pie chart and you can delineate and figure out in the pie what is being spent, because I'll bet you there's not as many new classrooms in one of the sites as there are in others. And so you'll start to see that there has been a look in this facilities plan and where the priorities are as it relates to the needs of each of the school, as well as incorporating what the community is saying, because they were all invited to come out to each of our meetings, town halls, surveys, and they were able to say, hey, you know, I really, I want the asphalt all fixed at Carver. This is what my priority is. And some people are saying, no, we need a two-story gym at the high school. This is what we need. And everybody had their say in what to do. What I'm asking you guys to do is really look at it not only as the priorities on page 7 of what we've already said some of the priorities are, but also look at the monetary values that we've already assigned to what we want to spend. So for instance, I'll just make up some numbers. If we had said we're going to spend $40 million on these new classrooms, where are they going? And so how does that fit in terms of our vision? Because if our vision is to build out TK, if our vision is to do VAPA, if our vision is to do that, then it should reflect already on this, because we've already vetted the community. We've already vetted it in FAC. And so we want to look at it in different perspectives. I want different angles on this, because when you share this, like if you were just to say at the back, this is all of our expenditure and this is overwhelming for the community. They didn't study this for 18 months. And so this may be even overwhelming for some of us, because we're going back into the weeds again. Like, are we doing this? And I want to be specific that we don't go back into the weeds, because at our level, at board level, we're the visionary. We need to be the leadership. I cannot be just nickel and diming and saying, okay, let's dwindle this down to not 13 million, but 9 million. And this is what we can do, because that's not what the goal is of this particular study session. But, you know, I'm hearing everybody. I understand, Mr. Chang, you're concerned about, our past history, the timeline. I know Mrs. Gill is very interested in the high school and some of the things that are not being answered. I hear that. And I know Mrs. Chang is concerned about what we're saying out in the public and how that's going to be viewed, and whether or not, people want to see exactly dollar for dollar, what are we doing? This is how we're spending, and these are our priorities. And I know that Mrs. Lamb is concerned, our kids are going to be disrupted, right? We're hearing all of that. These are all the concerns that cabinet, PTA, everybody's interested in. Our community cares that our education, of the children's education, is not disrupted. But we do have a great master plan. We need to have a look at it in terms of how is it digestible to our community. I want a different look. And I think you guys understand what I just asked for, right? That there are some priorities already listed. We want to pull that out. I want to see, like, in terms of pie, what's Carver spending their 35 million on? Because remember, at the end of the day, 140 million, if we were to divide it by 4, is about 35 million. So what's Carver spending it on? Where are the priorities for the high school versus Carver? Where is it for Valentine? And the needs aren't the same at Huntington Middle School. So if we can look at that and piecemeal that, that's what we need to kind of look at. Okay, I do not want us going back into the weeds and continue to pull and pull until we unravel it again, and then we dig it up again, and then we, seed it again. We don't want to do that. We've got this great thing. Let's look at what we can do with this first.
I think what I would like to see then to add to that, which is a perspective we haven't had as much of, is the political perspective. Because I think the FAC operated independently of the politics, which is what they should have done. It was absolutely right and appropriate for them to go through the process with LPA without regard to how it was going to play out politically. But now as a board, we are a political body, literally. We are accountable to the people. And so how is this beautiful document now going to be something, as President Ryan said, digestible by the public? And that's where I think perhaps more work with Team Civics would be helpful, because they're going to take this and they're going to take what they're hearing from their surveys and say, this is what needs to be communicated. This is what they need to see in order to get the money to actually make this a reality. So I think, and for me, it's not about wanting a per item list because circumstances are going to change, but it's having something to have to the public that's asking us for the political reason of actually being successful with a bond if we should choose to put that to the public.
So I think that's completely doable. And I think that actually what President Ryan said about the document that's in front of us, there was a lot of work that went into this. And I think we can extract from this something, more concise that could be given to the campaign committee. And the campaign committee then works with the bond consultant to come up with just that. A blueprint for where we're going and what we're doing with input from the board. And so I see all of that coming together. It's just not going to come together tonight, right? So tonight, we're doing this in stages and phases. Tonight, the objective is to ask any questions that you have about the facilities master plan. This is just the document. That is the vision that encompasses the vision. It is not necessarily something that the campaign committee is they will refer to it, but they're going to come up with their own marketing materials and their own branding going forward. So we're just tonight looking at this facilities master plan, which is a living, breathing document, and can be updated periodically to include the board's priorities whenever we, want to accomplish that. And I'm happy to make arrangements to do that. But during our open session meeting, this will be on the agenda for the board's approval. So if there are any questions of LPA tonight about this document, and then we can double back, bring Team Civics in, really focus on the board's priorities and how we're going to articulate that, and basically hand it over to the campaign committee to run with.
This is amazing.
It is.
It really is. Like, it's a beautiful document that represents like months and months of work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I so appreciate that we can make data-driven decisions now, because we have the data, which we haven't ever had before, which is incredible. So when you can't have our short abridged public version without this. And I think that's so important to understand that what Mrs. Ryan is asking for is something that we definitely need, but this is like the root of that. So thanks.
And I could see everybody's in this district staff's like footprint in it. Like I was like, oh, that was Dr. Richter, that's Dr. Lynn, that's Dr. Joy, that's Dr. Red. Like, and Dr. Del Torre, like I could see everybody's voice in this, which made it all the more, as well as each of the board members, which made it all the more beautiful to see as a collaborative document. So thank you everyone for all the work that went into it.
All right. We're a little behind the time, but I need to open up for the closed session. Okay. No,
We'll close this.
yes, please close, and then I need to
Thank you so much
open.
to LPA, and
Thank you
thank
for all-
you.
Thank you.